Capital gains taxes. Mistakes can cost your family hundreds of thousands of dollars. What are capital gains taxes and how do they work?
You only have a capital gains tax if you sell an asset. You buy a share of stock for $10. That's the cost basis. Let's say you're lucky, you sell it for $100. You have a $90 profit or capital gain, and you have to pay capital gains tax on that. Now, that assumes that you've held it a year. If you sell it in less than a year, it's regular income tax. So that's not advantageous. So significant tax on the gain. If you bought your home for $100,000 many years ago, as a lot of older folks around here did so, now you sell it for $2 million, you have a $1.9 million capital gain. Enormous capital gains tax exposure. So we have to be wary of this when we're doing our long-term planning. Unless you plan, you could lose 30% of the value of an asset that you sell.
We are going to talk about 4 key concepts today. The concept of the stepped up basis.
The cost basis is the price that you paid for an asset. If you sell it while you're living, you have this capital gains tax exposure, which can be devastating. First key point about this basis idea is that the basis enjoys what's called a step up at your passing. So if an asset is in your estate as your separate property or as community property for husband and wife, every asset in your community property trust gets this stepped up basis. So I gave that example of the share of stock that went up to $100 in value. At the time of the first death, doesn't matter what was paid. The new basis reflects the market value on the date of death, $100. If that stock is then sold for $100, subtract the new basis of $100, zero gain, zero tax. At the second death, if the trust is properly structured, there's going to be another, if there's a husband and wife situation, there'll be a second stepped up basis. So again, wiping out capital gains tax exposure. If an asset is not in your estate at the time of your passing, doesn't get a stepped up basis. So structure of your trust matters in this context of capital gains tax avoidance.
Let's go through 3 tips. So the first tip, if you're single and you've lived in your home at least 2 of the last 5 years, you can only have 1 residence, the first $250,000 in gain is tax-free. So if you bought a house for $500,000, you sell it 2 years later, you lived in it for those 2 years for $750,000, you don't have to pay any capital gains taxes on that. If there are 2 people, a married couple on title for that house, and they both lived there for 2 of the last 5 years, you can double that protection to $500,000. You could sell that, you buy a house for $500,000, you could sell it for $1 million, and you wouldn't have to pay a penny of capital gains taxes, again, as long as it's the residence. So you kind of have some choice as to which property is your primary residence. If you have more than one, maybe you move into one for a while and make it your primary residence. If you have rented a property out, we'll talk about what you can do for rentals, but maybe it makes sense to move back in before you sell it, or there's different things you can do. So $250,000 if you're single, $500,000 if you're a married couple, and if you've lived in a house for more than 2 years. So let's talk about if you have a rental property. Let's say that you have a fourplex and you're really sick of managing it. You don't want to deal with tenants anymore. You want to sell it. Well, if you just sell a rental property there, you don't get that $250,000 exemption. So if you sell it for more than you paid, you have to pay capital gains taxes. But if you do a 1031 exchange, this is in the IRS tax code, or a like-kind exchange, if you sell an income property and follow the right steps, you have to start this process before you sell, then if you buy another like-kind investment, another rental property or rental property investment, you don't have to pay any capital gains taxes. You can roll over your cost basis from one real estate investment to another. Let's say you have a fourplex that's worth $2 million. I know it's a big price, and you don't want to manage it anymore. You want to sell it. Well, you just sell it, and you bought it for $100,000 decades ago. Oh, hundreds of thousands in capital gains taxes. If you do a 1031 exchange, you could take all 2 million of that and put it into another real estate investment that qualifies it. It doesn't have to be a building, by the way. There are special Delaware statutory trusts. There are passive investments that are actually structured to work for a 1031 exchange. But if you put it into another real estate investment that qualifies, you pay 0 capital gains taxes. And so there's a way, for example, to take money from an actively managed pain in the butt property to a passively managed where you don't have to lift a finger anymore. And yeah, you might pay some fees, but then you might just get income from that. And rather than taking this huge capital gains tax hit, that full $2 million can go to work in this new investment for you, kicking off income. That new investment, if you ever sell it, would have a huge capital gains tax hit. But if you keep doing 1031 exchanges, we have many clients who've done these. If you keep it in your estate until one spouse passes away, all that capital gains tax wipes away. Remember that stepped up basis. So kick the can down the road, or as Mike pointed out in one of our talks earlier, kick the can down the road. You can avoid capital gains taxes. So 1031 exchanges are huge. strategy number 3, charitable remainder trust. So this would be for stock. If you have appreciated stock.
Here's the idea with the charitable remainder trust. Let's say you have a rental property or stock that's grown tremendously in value. It's not giving you a lot of liquidity or income. You need more income. You want more income. If you sell that stock to reinvest, well, remember that capital gains tax exposure, it just undercuts the whole idea. So what you do is you take the stock, you put it into this trust. Then after it's in the trust, the stock is sold. Because the remaining assets are going to go to a tax exempt organization, there is no capital gains tax exposure. So if you have a $1 million worth of stock, for example, if you sell it regularly, you're going to lose $300,000 to capital gains tax. So in this context, you sell it, you have $1 million to invest, and maybe you set a 6 or 7% annual rate of return. You get income for life at a rate that you set. And many individuals, by the way, will take that income that they didn't have before, buy a life insurance policy, structure it so that it's not in your trust, and you basically replace the wealth that you might have wanted to go to your kids with a life insurance policy. So
there's a lot of mixing and matching of these strategies that we can use. So we've helped many, many clients to do this. And frankly, this is how many of our clients who started out as kind of middle class have really risen up by smartly leveraging these rules to avoid capital gains tax. If you're a couple and you have a living trust, there are basically 2 core structures, and we call it 2AB or not 2AB. Many years ago, estate tax laws were much more strict, and we used to have to use what we call an AB structure to provide maximum protection for your estate. Without going into too many details, we no longer need that unless you have a very large estate. In simple plain English, just means when one spouse passes away, the trust splits into an A trust above ground, the surviving spouse is half, and the B trust below ground, the deceased spouse is half. If you did it a long time ago, you might have done it for estate tax purpose. That might not apply anymore. And if you did the AB trust, when someone passes away, everything in their estate gets that stepped up basis. Capital gains taxes vanish. If you have an AB trust, when the second spouse passes away, half of the estate in this B trust will not get a second step up in basis. So if one spouse outlives the other by many years, that can result in hundreds of thousands of dollars in unnecessary capital gains tax exposure. Let's say your spouse passed away a few years ago and you have an AB trust. And you're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize this was a problem. We can actually fix it after someone passes away too. We need to take a fresh look at your trust structure. If you have an AB trust, it may no longer make sense to have that. If you're thinking about selling real estate or appreciated stock, talk to us. If you haven't looked at your trust structure in a while, talk to us. Easy to find us, obviously, gilfix.com. Call us at 650-493-8070. I hope everybody's staying safe, sane, and healthy. Stay tuned for more. Give us a call.